Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. This is our March 2017 full BET meeting, and we have an interesting agenda. I'll have some comments about our public hearing later in the week, but I'd like to start with item 2, our regular routine applications. Mr. Drake.
We have today one routine application, which is LU1 in Land Use Department for $22,900, which is a transfer.
$22,900. Okay. Item's been moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion on the item? If you say 3 sentences, that will be longer than the Budget Committee meeting, so be very careful. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? That item is carried. That brings us to item number 3. Good evening.
Good evening. I think this is a record. 6:32. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the BET. I'd like to present the March 2017 Assessor's Report. A couple of things. First of all, the Board of Assessment Appeals had their last hearing today. It was a hearing that they had to reschedule due to the snowstorm last week. So we will have your totals, the grand list totals, by the end of the week, and I can attest that it is less than what we have budgeted, so the town will be in very good shape. Okay, second, litigation, Mr. Norton. We have 6 pretrials scheduled for this Friday, so hopefully we will get some of these settled. We did have a few in February, but we didn't get too far. We were just too far apart. The cases that are still pending for the grand list of 2012, we are going to trial. The trial was originally scheduled in January. It is now scheduled for April 4th and 5th, and it looks like that will be going forward. So hopefully those 2 will be resolved shortly as well. In addition, we are holding interviews for Mr. Shipman's position. To date, we've had 10 interviews. This week I have 4 more. And hopefully by the end of the month, we will start, in early April, we'll start our second round of interviews. We'll weed down the candidates to just a handful. Okay. Anybody have any questions for me this evening? Hope, maybe. Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Good. Another record, right? Good evening, Mr. Chairman, BET members. 2 quick updates. I also am about to embark on the interview process, but before I get there, an update. Today was the cutoff for the risk manager position. We got 14 applications. I had 4 more today. I had 10 on Friday. I read them for a second time. A tremendous pool of qualified individuals, a minimum of 5 that are highly qualified with direct experience in the risk area. A meeting tomorrow morning with Mary Pepe and Erica Mahoney from the HR department. They usually guide us through the process and usually act as observers during the interview process. So we have a good pool. 2 of the I can't disclose who they are, but 2 of the candidates are internal, and I haven't made up my mind on who I'm going to use to assist me before I go and turn it over to the BET Audit Committee, as I promised, as far as the final candidates. I think I have 2 people in the department that don't know either one of the internal candidates who would be a part of the 5 finalists. So that process is starting as of ending 4 o'clock today for the cutoff, and we start the process tomorrow morning. The second, and I'll turn it over to questions, is the outside management of the retirement fund. On page 4, you could see that We've got it down from 13 to 3 finalists. We're going to interview on March 28th, 2 of them, and the third one on March 29th. And then we will decide after the process is over, or during the process, if we are in fact going to go outside. I don't recall if I mentioned it. Right now, we've got 2 firm retirement board trustees that want to go through and hire outside management, 2 that don't, and 1 that's in the middle. So we don't know where we are until we complete this process. So I'll open it up to any questions on the controller's report. Oh, okay.
Say, this would be a recommendation of the retirement board to the investment advisory and turn advisory to the BET if you do go outside into selecting that person?
The intention is to comply with the purchasing rules, policy and procedures for RFPs or competitive bid. We've opened it up to some of the BET members as observers. They can't vote. And then what we need to do is let's say that we are going to go outside. The most critical part of this is setting the parameters for the asset allocation on the discretionary managed portion, not the private debt and equity. So we need the input from the BET, who ultimately is going to approve this after it goes to the Investment Advisory Committee and the Law Committee as far as the contract being legal order. So they have to be inclusive through the process at the end, but not at the very beginning, other than they can recommend during the process.
But just to confirm, I mean, if you do go outside, the BET ultimately has the final vote right on what this is the firm.
my understanding.
Yeah, that's my understanding from the charter.
You approve, the BET approves the contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Section 201.
Yeah, exactly.
Thirteen responses. Yes, we actually, we're going to go to okay, we're down to 3. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Don. Item number 5 is a motion to accept the treasurer's report. Motion moved by Mr. Norton, seconded by Ms. Tarkington. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? That motion is carried. Let me just get caught up. Item 6. I didn't have any standing committee reports. Item 7, nothing. Special project teams, nothing. New business. Review and approval of resolutions for the elected official salaries for the upcoming elected term. Does anybody need a copy of the resolutions? Can you? As soon as I get these passed out, I'll be calling on Ms. Weissler. Anybody need them? Okay. Ms. Weissler?
I'd like to take up each of these salaries individually. So the first would be, I'd like to move the following resolution, which was approved by the BET HR Committee 301. Resolve that the first selectman's salary be set at $142,000, a 2% increase effective December 1st, 2017, and $144,840, a 2% increase effective December 1, 2018, and that the selectmen's salaries be set at $14,200, a 2% increase effective December 1st, 2017, and $14,484, a 2% increase effective December 1st, 2018.
Okay, that's on behalf of the HR committee. Discussion on the item? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? That motion is carried. Ms. Weissler?
I'd like to make the following resolution, which was taken up and approved by the BET HR Committee 301. Resolved that the town clerk's salary be set at $101,962, a 2% increase for 2018, and $104,002, a 2% increase for 2019.
And the committee vote on that was?
That was 3-0.
301.
Thank you. That item has been moved on behalf of the HR Committee. Discussion on the item? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? That motion is carried. Ms. Weissler?
I'd like to move the following resolution, which was approved by the HR Committee 202. Resolved that the tax collector's salary be set at $101,962, a 2% increase for 2018, and $104,002, a 2% increase for 2019.
That's been moved on behalf of the HR Committee. Discussion? Mr. Raymer.
Two items, if I can. One, I believe that generally speaking on votes, a 202 vote is not usually reported as an approval. It's reported as a non-approval, although I'm not sure that Robert's Rules agrees with that. I would like guidance from the chair just to be sure that the minutes on that read correctly. Then secondly, in a moment, I'm going to offer an amendment to that, if I may.
Okay. Ms. Weissler, can you confirm the vote from the HR
The
Committee?
vote was 202, and I thought with 2 abstaining, it was still considered that it passed.
And in candor,
Robert's
Mr. Chairman, Robert's Rules would support what was just said. To my understanding, an abstaining vote is ignored, and so 2 voting out of 2 in favor is a passage. I just thought that generally speaking, from our policies and practices, we've not deemed that to be a passage. Be a recommendation. I don't mind either way. I just want the chair to indicate how the minutes should read, and I'll abide by whatever the chair says.
I checked on this when this happened, and you're correct. Robert's Rules would support this. As far as passed, I couldn't find another 202 vote. I did do a little bit of research, not a lot, a little.
Okay.
So I'm going to consider it passed on behalf of the HR committee, although I'm pretty sure I could get a second for it if it made you happy, but I consider that a passing vote.
Okay, no problem. I'll offer an amendment at this time.
Please.
I'm going to offer a substitute salary figure for both years, and the substitute figure is $75,000 for each of the 2 years. And if I have a second, I'll address myself to the motion.
So I have a motion to amend the tax collector to...
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so I understand what the motion is. Resolve that the tax collector be set at $75,000, so you want to delete the 2% increase paragraph?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And for 2018 to $75,000, and you want to delete the 2% increase?
That's correct also, Chairman.
For
Mr. Chairman.
2019?
Yes.
The motion has been moved, seconded. Discussion on the motion.
I would offer the following as the rationale by which I've proposed this change. I'm going to propose that going forward, that position, an elected position, be addressed as being a part-time position. Right now, the table of organization reflects that we have 2 full-time tax collectors, if I include the elected tax collector plus also the deputy tax collector, Brennan McDonough, who is receiving in the current year, I believe, a salary of $103,671.51 plus benefits. My first point is that I believe that the position is such that we do not need 2 full-time tax collectors. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, I believe that we've had success in the town, looking at the town attorney's office, of having a professional who supervises a department even though he himself is only part-time. And thus it seems to me that it may be that given a qualified deputy full-time $100,000 a year tax collector, that maybe we can achieve appropriate supervision of that department with an elected part-time official
official, $75,000 plus benefits is actually pretty good compensation, I would have said, for a part-time position. Thirdly, I have a reaction to the fact that we're spending, in round numbers, $500,000 to collect the town's taxes, and just from a visceral response, it seems to me that it's just simply too much money to be spending for the collection of taxes. Lastly, it seems to me that we've had an experience over the past year, maybe longer, that it seems to be a mistake to rely upon supervision from a full-time elected official. There's difficulties of responsiveness to issues and things that we've raised as a BET, and that I believe that there would be better policy for the town to migrate in measured stages toward an appointed official, hired official tax collector, reporting presumably to the finance department and the controller. And I view this as being the first measured step in the direction of moving in that direction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion on the motion? Mr. Lash?
Just a couple of comments. The Budget Committee has recommended to the full BET a budget for this department that is reduced from the current year's budget by $50,000. And when we meet on this subject as the full BET in another week, hopefully the full BET will support that. There was some discussion at the BET's HR committee about staffing for that department, and that discussion also supports that reduction in spending for the purpose of collecting taxes. I've commented in the past that when I was first selectman and Mr. Gomo was the controller and then the town administrator, we looked at the money that was being spent at that time by the town to collect taxes and the rate of tax collection, and believed that that department could be run at a substantially lower cost than we had been spending and that we are still currently spending. We're sort of stepping into gradual reductions so as to give the department and the tax collector, whoever that may be, an opportunity to review the operations and see if they can find ways to operate the department more cost effectively. There's been some discussion off and on, some of it in the newspapers, about my position on whether this should be an elected or an appointed position. I remind the record that when this question was raised by the BET back in 2002, 2003, I voted at that time to keep this as an elected position. In hindsight, I probably should have voted to make it appointed. But at this point, I think having it continue to be elected is the right thing for the town and will get us the best result. I agree with Mr. Raymer's observation that this does not have to be a full-time job, and that in effect, if we have a $100,000 roughly salary for the tax collector, we have sort of two qualified full-time tax collectors, each of which is costing us $100,000 plus. That seems by itself to be entirely too much money. So I'm not going to support Mr. Raymer's recommendation at this point, but I will remind everybody that as I understand it, the town attorney has determined that we in fact can change an elected official's salary in the middle of his term, and if the performance of the tax collector's office doesn't seem to continue to improve and get us the kind of service and the kind of cost control that we expect, I would be looking for support a year from now to reduce the tax collector's salary to something like this $75,000. So I'm happy with this now, and I'm happy with the work that the HR committee did, and I think the work that the Budget Committee did is coordinated with that, and I'm hoping that when the full BET looks at the budget, you'll adopt the budget that reflects the decision of the HR committee and the decision of the Budget Committee, and not try to change it at this stage of the game. Thank you.
Ms. Weissler?
I just wanted to respond to a couple of Mr. Raymer's points. First, he made the point that we have a deputy tax collector as well as a tax collector. I mean, we have a similar structure, for instance, in town clerk's office. We have a town clerk and assistant town clerk. We have a full selectman, or first selectman, and a town administrator. So I don't know if you extend that logic, you would extend that logic perhaps to those positions, and I'm not supportive of that. Second, in terms of staffing, that's not on the table today. That will come back as an amendment next week in the budget, but the tax collector did recommend a reduction of 2 full-time positions. So if you look at what the proposed table of organization is, it's a reduction of 2 positions, bring that down to slightly below 5 full-time equivalent positions. If you compare that to a peer community of Fairfield, they have 7 positions, so you're about 30% lower than a peer community if you're looking at a measure of efficiency. And third, the point about that this should really be an appointed position. I mean, as we all know, that's a charter position change and not really something within our purview. And I do want to get a little clarification on the final point that Mr. Lash made, because my understanding where the town attorney came out last year was that there was not a legal basis to change the salary in the interim, which was why that vote took place that it did. So maybe, Mr. Mason, you could confirm that.
I will speak with Wade on that.
Okay.
Further discussion? Ms. Oberlander?
Mr. Chairman, I am going to vote to support Mr. Raymer's motion, but for only one of his 3 rationales. 4 rationales, excuse me. I agree with Mr. Raymer that $500,000, roughly $500,000, is a lot to be paying to collect taxes. I'd like to reconcile it with the HR committee action. We voted in the HR committee action on the recommendation of the manager of the department, and he was here tonight, so thank you, Mr. Ladonia, for doing the hard work that the HR committee asked you to do. But on further contemplation, actually, with reference to the hard work of members of this board, the hard work of the members of the Board of Education, and a lack of data suggesting that we have not had a lack of candidates for this office. We have a number of individuals who work very, very hard for very little compensation. I feel that it is our responsibility, or my responsibility as a elected member of the Finance Board, being responsive to the concerns that I've heard from our constituents, to be fiscally prudent, to support a reduction in a salary in a department that seems to cost more than it should. So for that reason, I'm supporting Mr. Raymer's motion without acceptance of the other rationales.
Ms. Moriarty?
I just wanted to add 2 points. I am going to support Mr. Raymer's motion. First, regarding the ruling from Mr. Fox last year, I know that Mr. Mason will clarify it, but during the meeting, I think we got one response from Mr. Fox, but after the meeting, he corrected himself to say that it can be changed. So we'll get that clarified. But I'm going to support this motion because I realize that the charter change doesn't rest with this board, but I do think that the importance of the tax collection effort requires a standard of performance that we need to run the fiscal affairs of the town. And I think someone who is in the job full-time, subject to performance appraisal, subject to a review of how the department operates, by being under the purview of the finance department makes a lot more sense to me. And so I want to signal that support and that change by modifying the responsibilities of this elected official as indicated by the salary.
Further discussion? So before I close discussion on this, very often, Mr. Raymer, when you speak, I listen with open ears. And did you say the town attorney is a part-time position? I don't believe that's true. I've seen the contract. As a matter of fact, the person who signed that contract is sitting on the board here, and we had great conversations about that contract when it was first signed. As far as a charter change to make the position going forward part-time, as we did with the Board of Selectmen, they were, the first selectman was part-time, and the town made a charter change. If you're recommending a charter change to make the tax collector position part-time, that would be a different motion. I don't think we should be doing that when we're setting the salary, and not only that, that's a different process. This has been a long conversation for a running year, maybe more. It started with the election of trying to make the position appointed versus elected. Now we're talking about making the position part-time. I guess if you can't get the full step, we'll maybe look for the half step. And as far as the law department, part-time, full-time, that's a contractual position, and that position in the charter is also defined the same way as a position in the town. So I'm hoping we don't support this, and we move on and set the position for the upcoming elected term. And as you've heard in the committee reports, Monday night, we're going to discuss the changes from the Budget Committee, which seem to have the votes there, so hopefully we'll address that then. So with that, I'll call for the vote. Show of hands. All those in favor of...
Vote on the amendment, correct?
Right, thank you. On Mr. Raymer's motion to amend, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 in favor, opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Abstaining? I think I got it right. That item is 4 in favor, 8 against, 0 abstaining. Which brings us back to discussion on the original Ms. Weissler's motion. We're back on discussion on that item. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of the original motion, signify by saying aye. Hands up, all in favor, hands up. I want to count. I see 1, 2. 8. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. 8, 4, abstaining 0. That motion is carried. Thank you. Continuing on new business. So, I want to thank several members who have helped me with this draft 2 or revision 2 for our calendar for April. I gave up when I thought the charter change for the Board of Education might be on the April RTM call. And I was, at that point in time, if it had made it to the call, I was going to say, the RTM districts are going to be swamped with that. Maybe we'd just skip that. So a little background on this. This is something that I started getting out a little bit early with the RTM committees and districts. Typically, we try on some of the bigger committees to send 2 members. Okay, 1 from each party. Typically, we try to rotate month to month. If a Republican goes 1 month to a committee, a Democrat would go next month, and vice versa. It doesn't always work. Jeff Raymer's taking me on an all-expense cruise somewhere, and he's missing a meeting. I don't feel bad. I just found out that I have a conflict. But so I framed this out. A lot of us cover extra ones, but the idea is to get to these meetings, and the RTM changed their schedule. So from a calendar point of view, so we all understand this, because we had a discussion about this earlier. The RTM calendar for the month of April is the week of the 3rd is their committee and district meetings. The week of the 10th, they have nothing, and the 17th is their full meeting. All right, so it's not how it's in the book, by the way. So I would ask that if you can't make something, give me a holler, or better yet, find coverage. It would really help me. We try to get to these. My recommendation, especially in April, is I try to get to the committee chair, the district leader, and say, look, we're going to be there. If you want a quick 10 or 15 minutes at the start of the meeting to talk about the budget before you get to your items. You know, May is different. May, we're kind of there for the whole meeting, because that's what the whole meeting is about. Again, I hope, we can make modifications to this, and then we try to encourage everyone, if there's something that comes up, just kind of send an email to everybody. This is what we heard. They voted on this. They want to delete. They want to add. They want whatever they want to do. So I have extra copies here if anybody needs it. Roland, was there anything on that I needed you? Did I ask you for help on that item? I forget what it was. Okay, maybe not. Okay. So does anybody have any issues with that, reaching out in April? And
Only, Mr. Chairman. For me to express my apologies to my colleagues for being away while these important visits are taking place and leaving the burden on you. I apologize.
You don't have to apologize. If you have to apologize to Jill.
I did that. She did not accept my apology, so I'm trying it here.
I did that to Jill. So you'll see I put some footnotes. So again, we look for feedback. We want good transparency. We want good communications out there. Old business? Nothing? Approval of BET minutes? That's for February 21st? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The minutes have carried. Chairman's report, Mr. Drake.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Norton?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
I left this for my chairman's report. Thursday is our public hearing in this room. It begins at, I've heard 7, I've heard 6.
Oh, seven, sorry.
I think it's 7 o'clock. That's a full BET public hearing. Mr. Drake, I'm going to ask if you get a hold of Mr. Minarski. He normally has some forms for sign up. We'll try to collate the subject matters together if possible. We'll try to do the 3-minute rule. We'll take notes and we go from there. And then Monday night is our decision night, and I believe we're starting earlier that night. We're starting at,
That's at 5.
that's at 5. So,
And the schedule shows that, I don't know if it's correct or not, but the schedule here shows that it's being in the code room.
which one?
I'm talking about the Monday budget decision meeting.
Can you check on that? How'd that happen? You got to check on that.
Double check.
The reason is because everybody's got so much paperwork and we need a lot of space. It's usually on decision night. So if you can check with Elaine on that and see if we can find something. But other than that, we're off and running, and that's all I have.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I move we adjourn.
thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? We are done.